A series studying the 7 supplications of the Son of God. In this prayer, we've been unpacking week by week each one of these 7 different prayers, these 7 different things that we're instructed to ask God about and look to Him for, starting with our Father who is in heaven. He's drawn near to us by the grace of the gospel. And then we say, hallowed be thy name. Let your name be made holy and looked upon as separate and amazing, both in my eyes and in the eyes of everyone in the world. Let your kingdom come and let your will be done. God, the way things are in heaven, where your will is done perfectly and there's joy and there is light and there is peace. Let that kind of culture, that kind of rule, that kind of reign come and push out all the darkness and brokenness and disgusting twistedness that we have down here. Let it come up down here even as it is there. Give us today our daily bread. We talked about last week. What does it mean to look to God for finances? What does it mean to look to God for what we need, for our Father who loves to meet our needs, to actually do that? And then today, forgive us our debts, even as we forgive our debtors. Have you ever been offended? I mean, like, have you ever been in the kind of situation where someone did or said something to you that really, really offended you? I tend not to get too easily offended at things done against me, if I'm honest, because if you're me, you get a lot of comments, not necessarily awesome ones all the time, based on, this or the fact that I'm, need a stage so that you can see me. You know what I'm saying. I don't get too offended about these things. But I get more offended about people that I love when bad things happen to them or negative things happen to them. Now some of you are like, oh yeah, and you're remembering that one time. Oh yeah. It's just something happened just this week where someone offended someone that I loved, and if it had happened to me, I would have, but it happened to someone I love, so now I'm, pretty jumpy about it. I've been offended. Have you ever been the offender? Husbands, the answer to you is yes. I mean, you don't even think about this if those of you are husbands. And men, most of you will be husbands, so yes. Just go ahead and think yes. We have together both been the offended party and the party doing the offending. And so here we come to this prayer that says, Lord, forgive us our debts, even as, or another way to translate that little phrase would be, just like we forgive our debtors. In order for us to get this idea, to wrap our minds around forgiveness today and what it means to both be forgiven and to extend forgiveness, here's the deal. It's going to take God. It's going to take God doing something on the inside of us. And so I'm going to read the scriptures here, and then we're going to pray that God moves and speaks to us, yeah? Let's go Matthew 18, chapter 21. I don't know if you've noticed the pattern here when every time we've unpacked a different supplication, a different section of this prayer, I found a parable or a teaching or something that Jesus said or did to expand on what it is that he's teaching here, because there's something about us that likes stories, and stories about forgiveness are even better because stories resonate with us. This kind of like the story that you thought of about that one time when that one person did that one thing really bad to you. And probably the story that they're thinking of now that involves that one time you did the bad thing, Stories, they sit in our souls, and we keep them as a part of our collective consciousness. And so today I'd like to give you a different story to perhaps bring some completion to some of those more frayed ones, yeah? Matthew 18:21. Then Peter came up and said to him, Lord, how often will my brother sin against me and I forgive him? As many as 7 times? Jesus said to you, I do not say to you 7 times, but 70 times 7. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his servants. And when he began to settle, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. And since he could not pay, his master ordered him to be sold, with his wife and children and all that he had, and payment to be made. So the servant fell on his knees, imploring him, have patience with me, and I will pay you everything. And out of pity for him, the master of the servant released him and forgave him the debt. But when the same servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. And seizing him, he began to choke him, saying, "Pay me what you owe." So the servant fell down and pleaded with him, "Have patience with me, and I will pay you." But he refused and went out. And he found, I've lost my spot. His fellow servant went down and pleaded with him, "Have patience with me." He refused and went and put him in prison until he should pay the debt. When his fellow servants saw what had taken place, they were greatly distressed, and then they went and reported to their master all that had taken place. Then his master summoned him and said to him, "You wicked servant, I forgave you all the debt because you pleaded with me, and should not you have had mercy on your fellow servant as I have had mercy on you?" And in anger his master delivered him to the jailers until he should pay all his debt. So also my heavenly Father will do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother from your heart. God in heaven, holy is your name. Let your kingdom come and your will be done on the earth even as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread and forgive us our debts. And help us, God, to forgive our debtors. Lord, I'm asking you that in these next few moments you would grant the grace of forgiveness. You would grant the grace of forgiveness both to be received and extended, because forgiveness, if we are to stand in front of you, is essential. So God, come and help us this morning. In the name of Jesus, amen. I have been offended. You have been offended. We have both been the offenders. And in our culture, there's something about being offended that is supposed to give you like a right. Like, oh, that offends me. You must stop. That offends me. I don't know if you know this, but when you are offended, it's okay. It's okay. There's no new legislation needed. No one needs to go to jail if someone offends you with what they're saying or what they're doing. And we have a very litigious, offensive-ready culture, with just kind of a very short fuse with, well, what they said. I didn't get wished Merry Christmas at Kmart this year. I am offended. I did get wished Merry Christmas at Kmart this year. I'm offended. I'm in Kmart. I'm offended. There's a thing about being offended that we like it. We like it. We hold on to our offenses. They become like pets. They become the things that make us who we are. And yet Jesus says that we are to pray, "Forgive us our debts, even as we forgive our debtors." And the thing that I'm asking you to see with me this morning is that forgiveness, if we are to be God's people, is essential. It's not optional. It's not ketchup on the meal, okay? Forgiveness is essential, both to receive and to extend. Let me see if I can convince you of this relatively quickly. Now, the story opens here with Peter. And again, I love Peter. I think I'm just attracted to stories with Peter because I, again, identify with people who open their mouths and insert their feet. People like this, these are my people. I feel like I'm related to these kinds of people. Don't nod. You don't need to nod. None of you need to, yes, you do identify with those people. Some of you are nodding way too vigorously to make me comfortable. But I identify with these kinds of stories. And so Peter walks up, and you got to figure Peter thought he'd be pretty good. Like, "Hey, Jesus, I had an idea. So if my brothers, say that guy over there, we'll pick on Judas because it didn't turn out too well. Let's say Judas offends Peter. If he offends me, what do you think? 7 times? Is 7 good?" And he said, thinking, I guess, that would be reasonable. And Jesus says, no. You've missed the gospel. You've missed it. You missed it, Peter. I say to you, if he offends you, you were to forgive him 70 times 7, which isn't 77 times or 770 times. Don't do math. What he's saying is, you keep forgiving him. You keep forgiving him. Keep forgiving him. And then Jesus goes off into one of his stories, and I'm sure Peter probably just wanted a quick and easy answer, like, yeah, 7, that's probably good. And what did he get? He got a story. A story we'll share with you. The story opens with the king and a servant. And the king apparently is quite wealthy, and the servant comes to the king very much in debt. In fact, it says that he's so much in debt that he owes 20,000 talents, I believe. Now, let me just put that in modern day English for you. It's a little bit difficult to measure exactly what a talent is, but let me give you a rough guide. a talent could be considered about 20 years' wages for an average laborer. So you figure, what's a good wage around here? I guess if you make $15 an hour, you make 30 grand a year, right? 30 grand a year times 20 years of those, what is that, $600,000? Okay. So the grand total of the debt that he owed this man was something on the order of $6 billion. Everyone do this with me, okay? $6 billion. I mean, that's just an unfathomable amount of money to owe personally. I know some of you are like, no, that's roughly how much Harvard is charging me for my graduate degree. I understand, okay? And hopefully with the rate of inflation in 40 years from now, you will come out of jail of debt. No, $6 billion. And so he comes to him and the point is not that we should know exactly what the debt is. The point is to know that the debt that the servant owes the master has a few qualities about it. One, it's a ridiculous amount of money. It's not going to be paid back. He can't pay it back. It's not a debt. It's not like $100,000. It's not a mortgage. Let's set up 10 easy payments. It's not like that. It's billions. And he comes to him and he's facing a couple of choices. Being sold into slavery, being owned by the thing that he owes, or casting himself on the mercy of the king. The debt was of such a kind that he could have never paid it back because it was far too massive. And in this moment, what Jesus is trying to give us a picture, okay? I'll give you some context clues. You're not the king. We're the servants. Jesus, how many times must I forgive my brother? I mean, my brother, have you met my brother Jesus? I mean, he is really, really annoying. He calls me all the time just to tell me about silly things. He's got bad jokes and never wants to stop sharing really stupid YouTube clips with me. Like, he offends me, annoys me. He doesn't wear enough deodorant. He won't quit. You know, these people, some of you don't know these people because you're these people. Like, you know these people, right? No one ever calls me with their jokes. Might be you. If in that moment you just thought of 10 or 15 YouTube clips that you needed to share with someone, that is you. How many times must I forgive them? 70 times 7. You must keep on forgiving them. Well, why? I'll tell you why, Peter. There's a servant and a king. There's a servant and a king. And in order for that servant not to be owned by the thing that he owes, forgiveness is essential. Forgiveness is essential. And so what happens in the story, the servant comes and he pleads with the king and he says, I'll work. I'll do anything that I can. I'll work. I'll pay it off. I promise that I'll pay it off. And the king looks upon him and is prepared to put him in slavery, in bondage, and to sell him off, him and his kids and his wife and all of his property, to try and regain some of what he has lost, which isn't to say that God will sell us into slavery. It's to say that we are already owned by the thing that we owe against him. See, forgiveness is a costly thing. There's a $6 billion debt here. Someone must pay it. Someone must reckon the debt paid. Someone must deal with the debt. And when you have a debt against someone, one of a couple of things happens. You pay it, they pay it, or you meet somewhere in the middle. But let me tell you, it is paid. It is paid. Notice what the servant doesn't say. He doesn't say and come up and say, I can't pay my debt. And I need you to pay it. He comes and he's pleading and he still thinks that somehow he can pay off the debt that he owes. And he comes up and he says, I'll do anything that I can. I'll work. I'll put in an 80-hour week instead of a 40-hour week. I'll do whatever I can. God, I'll go to church. God, I'll do this. I'll watch what I say. I'll watch what I do. If you give me this, then I'll do this. And he starts bargaining. How familiar does that sound? God, I know I really screwed up here. I know that for the first few years of my life, I really messed up, or I really wasn't doing this right, or, the way I treated her or the way she treated me, it wasn't right. But if you'll give me another chance, then I'll show you that I can do it. Which is roughly something that the servant said. And then what does the king say? Oh, okay. Great. I'll give you, a few more years. Great, that's fine. No. That's not what he says. There's a funny Greek word here. It's slagnitsomai, which is a fun word to say. But it means to feel deep and abiding mercy, compassion. It says that the king looked on him and felt that. So it's this word that gives this picture of like the heart being just wrenched and turned. And he doesn't look at the servant and say, oh, okay. Well, just do better next time, son. Off you go. What does he say? He looked on him, the king looked upon him and had compassion and forgave him his debt. The first part of the story is essential to see that forgiveness is essential to be received. This story, you've got to understand, isn't about a king and a servant. It's about you. And it's about me. And it's about God. And it's about the nature of our relationship. And it's also about the nature of our relationships with each other. That if we're going to be in God's kingdom, if we're going to be properly subject to the king, then we need the king to do something about our debt. I told you that forgiveness is a costly thing. Forgiveness is a weighty thing. Forgiveness is something that either you're going to pay my debt, I'm going to pay my debt, or we're going to come with something in the middle. And so what happens here in the story? I'll work really hard. I'll do it. What do you need? Grass mowed? You need a new, what is it? What can I do? I'll scrub the castle toilets or whatever they had in the first century. He says, no. The king's heart was filled with compassion, and he said, I forgive you. For this servant, forgiveness is essential. For you, forgiveness is essential. We'll get to why in just a minute. And so the story continues. Great. Thank you. I don't have to do anything? Sweet. All right. All right, I'm not $6 billion in debt, which you got to figure, that's a good day. Okay, the day you wake up and you're not $6 billion in debt, that's a good day. That's a day you go, okay, I'm feeling a little bit lighter, a little bit better. You're walking with a new spring in your step. You'd figure that the servant was going to be in a good mood. And so he walks out of the castle, and I guess his wife and kids toddle off because they're not even mentioned anymore. And then he comes up to one of his fellow servants who owes him a few hundred denarii. Now, to put that in perspective, a few hundred denarii would be something like, $10,000-15,000. Okay, not a small amount of money, obviously. And it says that the first thing this servant did was find the other servant, put his hands on him, and said, give me what you owe me. The scriptures say that he began to choke him. To choke him. My brother put him in a World Wrestling Federation kind of move to get his money back, to get his thing paid off, because he says, you owe me thousands. Pay it back. And the other servants see this and they go, huh. They start to wonder about it and they tell the king. And you know the rest of the story. The king comes, brings the servant back before him and says, what's wrong with you? I just wiped out your $6 billion debt. I just took that away. I just wrote that check. And now you're going to go out and you're going to choke one of your fellow servants for a measly amount of money? You're going to go out and you're going to be really offended that someone owes you something and demand it of them. You're going to go out and really own that thing that someone owes you and come out and demand that they repay you. What's wrong with you? There's another highlighted nature to the essential part of forgiveness, which is that forgiveness is not only essential for us to receive, but in order for us properly to receive it, forgiveness is essential for us to extend. We know that the servant didn't get it. We know that the servant didn't get the free, costless, but completely invaluable grace that he was shown. He didn't get it because what did he say? He didn't cast himself on the cares, on the mercy of the king and say, listen, I can't pay. Like, I got nothing. $6 billion, I can't. He didn't do that. What did he say? Remember, I'll work it. I'll do it. I'll work it. I will make this work. The king wipes out his debt. And he walked out of that hall, having stood before his king, being forgiven and not at all understanding what just went on. The grace of the gospel is this. We have a massive debt against God. I was telling our life and doctrine class the other week, my dad, a few years ago, let me drive his car. And at the time, his car was new. Nice, new car. Plush leather, backs itself in. I mean, one of those cars. And I put my daughter in it. And he was, I just needed to I was coming home from overseas. We'd been, didn't have a car. Hey, Dad, can I borrow? Oh, yeah, borrow the car. Take it out, no problem. And I put Alana in, just set her there. All right, let me get the bag. I turn around and look, and Alana's found a ballpoint pen. And Alana made art. Beautiful art on the plush leather armrest of his nice new car. So I hit her. No, I duct taped her to the bumper and I drove away. No, that was all the mental picture that was going on. Like, I don't know what I said or did. Only Jesus knows, and we'll all get to watch it and laugh in the playback one day in glory. But it wasn't a good moment. Can I just be honest with you and say, I was going holy cow, this is a really bad moment. I don't know how I'm going to, this one armrest probably costs more than what I am here to make in a month. And so I call my dad and I'm like, well, the first thing I did is I went to Walmart. And I found every automotive cleaning product possible. And I was trying it out, scrubbing it, didn't work, try it out. And all I really did was screwed up the leather a little bit more. And finally I called my dad and I was like, Dad, my daughter drew in your car in a very conspicuous spot with a pen. I'm just like that stupid servant. Try to fix it. I incur a debt. I don't know, what's an armrest in a car? Probably $1,000 if you take it back to a dealer. If it's wrapped in, baby seal leather or whatever this was wrapped in. Calm down, environmentalist. That was just a joke, all right? Relax. It's not really. I'm sure it was wrapped in baby bald eagle feathers or something. And much. Just playing. But I love to see some of you. I don't know. There's a debt. There's something that's owed. And now I owe my father. And so I, like a fool, try to fix it. And then I call him and I say, Dad, my daughter, and I'll pay you back. And he's like, Adam, you're a missionary. No, you won't. I don't know if you know, missionary, not the most lucrative profession one can choose for himself. And so what happened? My father, who loves me, just absorbed the debt. He absorbed the debt. Took it in at some point, got it fixed or got it replaced, I don't know. But there are no pens or children in his car anymore. But he absorbed the debt. I, like that stupid servant, and like we do with our Father, Christians, talking to you men and women who got Jesus on your jersey, the cross around your neck, and say, I'm free, I'm forgiven, man, I'm one of God's people, I've accepted his free grace and mercy, and you hold on to bitterness as though your life depended on it. Because you and me are like that stupid servant who doesn't understand the debt that has been wiped off. Try to scrub it out. You try to fix it. You try to, God, if you just accept me, I'll just pay it back. And some of us walk out of these halls and churches like this, knowing that we're forgiven and not understanding how. And we, like that servant, we will receive forgiveness and refuse to extend it. We'll receive forgiveness and then we'll walk out at mom, dad, brother, sister, boyfriend, girlfriend, ex-husband, whoever did us wrong, and hold that grudge, hold that thing, hold that offense, because even though we have been forgiven an infinite debt, we feel somehow that it is right for us to hold our finite debts against others. See, forgiveness is essential. It's not only essential for us to receive, it's essential for us to extend. Because if we don't extend it, then we merely show that we never have understood it. And if we have never understood it, then we must ask ourselves, have we actually received it? Forgiveness is essential to receive and extend. But if we stop there, that's not good news. I don't know if you drive around here, if you've been to the airport recently, but there's a big billboard that says, "Forgive!" Big font. And then there's a little URL like tryforgiveness.com or something. That's not good news. That's not good news. Hey, forgive. Oh, okay. Except for those things that are really hard. Except for those things that well, Pastor Adam, you don't understand. You don't know what he did to me. You don't know what my dad used to say to me. You don't know what he did to my mom. You don't know what my mom did to me. You don't know. You don't have any idea what has been done to me. You don't have any idea what's been said to me. You don't know what's gone on to me. And you're going to tell me to forgive? No. And you know what? If that was my news right here, if the good news of the gospel was that, hey, Jesus was a nice guy who walked around with sheep, wore a big white gown and said, hey, forgive people. And we went around and so I said, so guess what? Because a guy lived a long time ago who was nice and forgave people, you should forgive. That's not good news unless he offers some kind of forgiveness to you. We can't merely go. Did you see the movie Pay It Forward? Remember this film? Right? Pay it forward. Great idea. All right, just do some nice works, and but pay them forward. If you receive something nice, then do something nice out there. And that sounds really awesome. And you leave the theater, and you stop watching the movie, you're like, man, that could really work. Except for the people who don't. Oh yeah, that probably won't work. And then there was no ethical revolution, right? We're not living in utopia a few years on this side of Pay It Forward, right? Why? Because it's not good news. It's not transformational. It's not good news to think that someone's done something nice for you, so you should do something nice for someone else. Unless there was no way for you to have gotten rid of the thing yourself, unless there was no way for you to have overcome the debt, crossed the chasm, paid the bill, met the ransom. If there was no way that you were going to do it, if all of a sudden the mindset of we before God and the servant before the king changes from, if you just give me another chance, I'll get it done, to you could give me a million chances and I'll never get it done. Then we might have a chance. See, if we're going to stand before the king, if we're going to know him, if we're going to stand faultless, debtless, and in the black in front of our king, then the debt must be paid. So what's the debt? What are the barriers to our forgiveness? Well, it's sin. It's sin. It's that old archaic word that none of us like to say. So we call it by names of diseases. We call it lack of education. We call it poverty. We call it hunger. We call it disease. We call it brokenness. We call it not by its name, but by its fruits. And we try to go and pick the fruits without actually dealing with the roots, because it's sin. You and me, we're like the servant. We're like me and my daughter in my dad's car. We've taken God's creation, his world, the universe that he made, to be like a handcrafted cathedral of stars, echoing the praise of the glory of the one who made it, so that by looking at it and being in it for eternity, we might experience him and know him, and that in knowing him, we would have joy. That's why he made everything. And then we took that and inverted it upon ourselves, and in so doing, broke it. We broke it. And we incurred against God and against one another an incalculable debt of sin and brokenness that no amount of work, no amount of try harder, do better, I'm all right, you're all right, let's go get some therapy, go to a seminar, no amount of that could ever actually help. So God looked at us, our King, in the throne room, calling us to account. You owe me $6 billion. And what do? Lord, just give us a few more degree programs. If you just let us feed more people, if you just give us a minute to get everyone a little bit more educated, if you just give us a few minutes, just give us a few years with this new NGO or this new initiative or this new educational, or if you just let us elect some Republicans or some Democrats or some Libertarians or some communists or some anarchists or some whatever-ists, then we'll rectify this and we'll put it back the way it was. And he looks at us, knowing we can't possibly fix what we've broken. And he absorbs the debt. That's the good news of the gospel, church. That's the good news of the gospel. The good news of the gospel isn't God made some rules, we broke them, and so if we do better, try harder, in Jesus' name, amen, then he'll like us again. The good news of the gospel is that God gave us a universe that was designed to have us have joy in him and him in us, and we broke it because instead of making it all about him, we made it all about us. And so we receive the penalty for our debt. But God looks at us and says, there's no way they can fix this. There's no way they can handle this. And so he absorbs the debt by coming into humanity, by putting flesh on, by leaving heaven, by taking a step out of the throne room, as it were, and walking around in a place, in a time, speaking a language, living a life perfectly just as we never could, dying death infinitely for us, separating himself from the Father, and then rising again, conquering Satan, sin, death, and demons to the right hand of God the Father Almighty in victory, overcoming our debt in his name. That's good news. That's what he's done. And yet we, like that stupid servant, we walk out and we, thanks God. Thanks for that. Thanks for the one up. Thanks for the help. Thanks for the leg up. Thanks for the attaboy chum. Thanks for whatever it is. We really appreciate the whatever that you've given us. Now that my debt's off my mind, it's a good thing you came, God. It's a good thing you started talking about debts, because I got some people to mention to you. Now that we're, done dealing with my debt, let me talk to you about these people's debts. Let me bring up my dad. Let me bring up my mom. Let me bring up my boyfriend or girlfriend or my friends or my aunt or that person. And let me tell you this, okay? You've got barriers to receiving the forgiveness in your life that you must receive. I understand that. There are two in name. One of them is guilt. Some of you have done some bad stuff, and you're aware of it. You've done some awful, awful things, and you know it. You've stood before your king, and you've left, and you've done some awful things. And I understand that. And when you think about what you've done, and then you think about the fact that God would forgive you, you go, no, there's no way. God, I understand that, you got grace and mercy for all of them out there, but you don't know what I've done. Some of it's guilt. Some of it's pain. Probably a far greater amount of you. Guilt says, well, God, you don't know what I've done. Pain says, you don't know what they've done to me. Some of you had some great parents. Some of you had some awful parents. Some of you have been abused and mistreated. Some of you have been raped. Some of you have been sexually abused. Some of you have been lied to. Some of you have been hit. Some of you have been abandoned. Some of you have had some awful things done to you. I understand that. And when you hear that God would forgive you in such a way that you could extend forgiveness to them, you go, you don't understand what they've done. I understand that you would forgive me because I haven't done what they've done. Here's the problem with the problems. They're rooted in pride. Guilt just says, my issues, they just matter more than God's grace. What I've done wrong, it's just weightier and more impressive than what God has done right. My sin's bigger than the cross. Sorry. Pain says their sin, their issues, It's so bad that not even God could forgive them. Really? Who do you think you are? I hear that some of you have had some issues. I hear that. And as your pastor, I care deeply about that. But as a proclaimer to you of the grace of God, I don't care a lick about that. Because it pales in comparison to the grace that's on offer to you. Pales. Your pain, you need to see this. Your pain, either that you have received or that you have given, is nothing compared to the grace and love of God in the cross. Your pain is less than God's love for you. And your pain and offense is less than God's love and grace for them. Now, this is hard to hear. This is one of those messages which gives us more room to grow. Because some of you are listening to me right now and you're going, I will never come back here. I hope that's not the case. But this is true. The weightiness and costliness and worthiness of the death and the burial and the resurrection of the Son of God is of such a kind that it can give you fuel both to be forgiven and to be a forgiver. Such that now you can say, my chains fell off, my heart was free, I rose, went forth, and followed thee. Do you know what your chains are? They're not merely the things that you've done wrong to incur debt against God. They're the things that others have done wrong against you that you are holding on to. And I say to you today in the name of Jesus that those things can be let go of. They can be let go of. Some of you define yourself by your pain. And when you get together in small groups, all you do is talk about how you're dealing with your issues. And it all becomes about you, and what others have done to you. And you know what that is? That turns you into a navel-gazing, youistic, useless Christian. Useless. Your eyes are so focused on you and your pain that you fail to see that there is a God who died on Golgotha. And He matters more. He matters more. His love is better. His sacrifice is greater. His resurrection is more powerful. And all the pain and all the brokenness and all of the hurt. I have this quote from one of my favorite theologians and a professor of mine, John Frame. It says, when we meditate on the cross, our rivalries with others seem rather trivial. Jesus died for us. Can we not just bend a little to accommodate a brother or sister? The demands of love upon us seem so little compared to what love demanded of Him. So here's the invitation. Some of you need, for the very first time, to receive the forgiveness that God has offered for you. For the very first time, you've come and maybe you grew up religious, or maybe you grew up at or in proximity to church, or maybe this is your first time in church really hearing the good news of the gospel. And what I'm here to tell you is that all of your debts and all of your offenses and everything bad that you've done and everything horrible that's been done to you can be wiped away in a moment with the love and the grace and the mercy of God. If you would put your back to those things and stop defining yourself by your pain and the pain that you've caused others and look to God and say, I can't pay the debt. Would you? And look to Jesus. Then today you could not only be forgiven, but you could be the kind of person who extends forgiveness. Some of you need to do that today. Today. Some of you, you're Christians, you love Jesus, but your pain, I want you to hear me. I love you. I love you. And you got to know me. You got to know that to hear this. Because if I was just some fly-by-night preacher telling you stuff like this, and maybe that would be a little bit easier for you to flake off, but I want you to hear this. I love you. I pray for you. I'm going to stand before God for how I lead you. I know that. And as your pastor, your pain is gloriously overshadowed by the cross. It just is. I've received pain. I've received offense. My wife's received pain. She's received offense. We together have received pain. We've received offense. But Jesus is better. I'll sum up by saying this. God has forgiven you an infinite debt. How dare you hold someone's debt that is less than that? If you who have been forgiven much cannot forgive little, then how can you expect your Heavenly Father to truly forgive you much? Forgive us our debts, even as we forgive our debtors.